Welcome everyone to another Building Digital micro conference. My name is Kaiska Heel and I am the multimedia producer for Building Digital. Now this micro conference is titled The Future of AI Integration in Construction, sponsored by Ignite. So this micro conference will analyse how artificial intelligence is revolutionising the construction industry by enhancing project planning, execution and data management. Our panel will discuss the emergence of AI applications within construction, including predictive analytics for risk management, automation in scheduling, and real-time data analysis for improved decision-making. We'll also discuss the opportunities and challenges associated with implementing AI technologies in the built environment, providing valuable insights into both the potential benefits and the practical hurdles. So let's discover how leveraging AI technologies can transform your construction projects, drive innovation, and prepare your organization for the future of the industry. Our next keynote speaker is Alasdair Reisner, who's the Chief Executive at the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. So Alasdair, if you'd like to share your screen and your presentation, I'll let you take it away.
For today, I'm really here to talk about a bit of work that our organisation published earlier this year that was a report looking at the implementation of artificial intelligence in the UK construction sector. So a little bit of the background. So for me, this is the totemic date, not in terms of the overall development of artificial intelligence, but in terms of the public perception of artificial intelligence and suddenly it becoming a thing that wasn't just something that happened in universities, but was actually available to all of us. And that was the introduction by OpenAI of a particular model of their ChatGPT system. We, about 6 months later, were starting to, so I should introduce myself. I run the Civil Engineering Contractors Association, representative body for civils firms. So our members approached us to say, we can kind of see all this stuff happening and we're nervous both because we don't want to miss the boat on the opportunity, but equally we're worried about what the risks of the implementation of artificial intelligence might be for our businesses. So they commissioned us to carry out a research report. As part of that, we're a member of the Construction Leadership Council, and so they were also looking at the same time around productivity and how we can boost productivity in the sector. So our commission was included in that as one of the bits of work the industry is doing to try and improve productivity, specifically in this case through the safe adoption of AI systems. So we ran some workshops at the beginning of last year, and through the course of the rest of last year, we undertook research to try and tease out some of the answers to the issues that our members had raised. So before I get into that, I think it's just useful to sort of capture where we are in terms of the use of AI. Now, there's some obvious things that people will have probably been familiar with. So Copilot appearing suddenly in your Microsoft systems, the use of ChatGPT, but also our business as a trade association has been revolutionized by fireflies, which I think we may even have a fireflies running in the background in this meeting. But it's a simple note taker. But I used to spend 2-3 hours per hour of a meeting writing up the notes for meetings. It provides me with that within 5 minutes at the end of a meeting with annotated, identified actions. And so it's just an example of that productivity gain that is out there available for us to tap into. But more simple things like dictating text through Word or autocomplete when you're typing stuff on your phone, again, is tapping into AI systems. And just to show how much this is integrated into our life, even stuff that you probably don't even think about. So the recommendation within Netflix, when you're choosing what to watch each night, if you've got Netflix, backs onto the use of artificial intelligence in order to help define what each individual user will have most interest in. So that's where we are as a society. And I hope I can move on the slide. It's interesting. There we go. I now want to talk about sort of what the applications might be in construction. So with this, what we very quickly realized was there's not a silver bullet AI solution for the construction sector. There will be a proliferation of solutions, but they'll probably fit within a number of sort of role categories. So the first of those is sort of the front end design development of projects. Second, we've got management, so people in leadership and management roles and how it will help them do their job more effectively. We've got commercial, so those that are dealing with the sort of the contractual, the spend, the income side of things. And that's for me where I see the earliest moves to implement AI. Delivery, so when you're actually on site and placing material and building new assets, we see quite a lot of use cases there. And also support services, so the stuff that happens around the sides of construction, but is essential to the way that we operate as an industry. So I'm just going to very quickly canter through sort of how we see AI being applied in each of those cases. So sorry, my slides are not working properly. On project planning and design, it gives the opportunity to go to historic design data and use that to form thousands of design options very rapidly. Historically, I think that would have been done by hand or by CAD, but this sort of automates that and can produce optimized designs. It can even do the assessment of which of those designs, given certain parameters, would be the best solution. Then if you decide, well, that's what you designed, but actually we've got a new requirement, this can automate that process and update those digital models to meet that new demand while still ensuring that anything that's produced aligns with the existing brief that hasn't changed. Error detection, I think this is something that we saw with the implementation of building information management, that ability to start clash detecting, understanding where there may be errors or where there may be areas that are prone to errors and flagging that up to the end user. Community engagement, I think this is a really interesting thing. We know that planning for projects increasingly requires developers to engage with communities, and we're seeing some novel tools that are, in essence, sucking on the fire hose of data that comes from social media and more widely on the web, and can tell you what people are saying about your project automatically. You're not having to go and source that information. It's giving you a bit of a data dump of what the perceptions are, which is actionable and allows you to go out and respond to that. And finally, simulation and visualization. It not only produces the design, but it can provide simulation of what those assets would look like in construction and how they would operate. So that's just a bit of a capture of what we think project planning and design will look like. On the management side of things, the role of a manager is to have oversight of the business and to make decisions on the best approach to managing the construction. So that often brings on board a lot of complex information. So we see that AI will help managers to analyze complex data, pull out useful information, and guide leaders. I say here in the slide towards better understanding, but to better decisions as well. And part of that, I should say, is it can learn from the decisions that you do make. So also over time, it gets even better at responding to the way that you make decisions and builds on that. Process improvement. So when you've got an end-to-end process as part of what you're delivering, it can start to analyze that, look at historic data sets, look at what's going on elsewhere in the industry, look at what's happening elsewhere in your business, and try and improve those processes to optimize your workflows. And similar to that, so your scheduling, I think one of the neatest AI tools that we've seen recently is around sort of automating your project scheduling, optimizing that process. So you've got less dead time, less underutilized assets. Things are moving at pace because almost on the fly, the scheduling is updating itself to address anything that's going on in the real world around it. Finally, HSEQ, so health, safety, environment, and quality. I'll come back to this again in the delivery side of things, but if you're a manager, what you want to do is understand globally what's happening in your business and have real-time insight from that. So what this can do is pull from this and give you a bit of a download as to any concerns that are happening across the business, any opportunities for improvement, but giving that rather than managers having to plow through reams and reams of documents in order to pull out that data. On the commercial side of things, I think clearly this gives us the ability to tap into historic cost data much more effectively and live project data to give better cost forecasting accuracy. We've seen in the last few years some really big challenges, particularly on major infrastructure projects, where cost forecasting accuracy hasn't proven to be as good as it could have been. So this gives us the ability to have hopefully greater confidence in the cost forecasting for projects and identify where things are moving away from acceptable parameters. Similarly, building up bids, automating the estimating process. It's an intensive activity, so building up that cost and understanding, particularly being able to draw on live data, because we know that one of the challenges is as materials costs vary in the market, that ability to automatically be updating so that the data you submit as part of your cost estimate is absolutely up to date feels like a really golden opportunity. And again, here's another area where we're seeing really big moves forward at the moment. The ability to read and interpret large contract documents, I think is a particular benefit for smaller businesses who may not have in-house counsel, may not have sort of senior commercial leads that have many years of experience with contracts. So that ability to identify the specific risks to that contract, whether it's a bespoke contract, whether it's a standard form, and guide how that is then subsequently used on site. Finally, I think there's a piece here around particularly large businesses have complex supplier ecosystems. So the ability to reach out into that ecosystem, grab data, and again, provide a picture of what's happening there, what emergent risks are there, what capacity you might have available to you, how you can enhance that supply chain, but with support, feels like a real opportunity to apply AI. So I said I'd get to the delivery side of things. So we're already seeing telematics, so the data that's coming out of individual items of plant on its utilization, you know, what speed its engine's running at, what loads it's been carrying. That's already being used, but it's probably not being used as well as it could. So this is an opportunity to really dig into that data and therefore optimize the way that plant is being used. I talked earlier about being able to visualize things. Well, we can take it a step further and actually simulate the work being done, both to familiarize operatives, but also to identify any challenges that might not have been picked up elsewhere in the design process. And ultimately, moving towards a world where we're automating the use of plant and tools, both through automated plant and robotics. This feels like an agenda that's moving on very quickly. We are still seeing trials happening around the world with automation of plant. So the construction site of the future may be very different to the construction site of today. And finally, I said I'd come back to safety monitoring. So while for the managers on site, there will be a benefit, one of the things that we're starting to see is AI being used on a sort of a scanning basis on sites to identify and warn of risks live, building on existing sort of wearable technologies that have done that on a less intelligent basis, but really trying to identify those risks and respond to them. So finally, in the support services, I think this is stuff like making sure that you're aligned with all of the compliance, whether that's environment, health and safety, client compliance requirements. So automating that process and again, flagging up any issues. Market analysis. So if you're looking to win work, are you tapping into all of the data sets that are available to you without getting weighed down in data? So that ability to understand what those future markets might be and respond to that. Similarly, customer relationship management. On the fly, understanding what's going on in your customers' businesses so that when your people are going out to meet customers, they've got really good quality insight as to what those customers care about, anything that might be emerging in their business, and making sure that you know your customers well. We had a question previously about bid preparation. I think this is, again, a really interesting area. A lot of providers in the market are ready who will offer to automate bid preparation. We'll come back later in this presentation about some of the risks associated there, but clearly this is something that could be an efficiency opportunity. and recruitment. So as part of your onboarding of people, I think we're already seeing a large part of that process being taken out of the hands of humans and going through AI systems. Again, there's risks around that, particularly with bias, but as a way of cutting out non-viable candidates efficiently, it feels like that's the direction of travel. So I've talked about the good. I'm now going to quickly run through the bad, and I'm mindful of time, so I will be running through this quite quickly. So these are just some of the points that I think we need to think about when we look at risks and challenges. But rather than just look at the data points, I'm going to dig into a few of these in a little bit more detail. The shares are being shared afterwards, so you will be able to review this in a bit more detail. So on privacy, all of this stuff, particularly where we're using wearable technology and cameras or personal data, means that there are concerns about what that data is being used for, who's getting access to that data. I think some of the stuff that Pavlina talked about in her previous discussion, this is stuff that we need to be aware of. If you're putting some of this stuff into public models, you've lost control of that data. So are you running the risk of breaching privacy legislation? Particularly if there is that leakage out in public-facing models. So I think it's really important that where third parties are getting involved in this, you've got to make sure that you've got appropriate consents in place. Next is overdependence. Put simply, I've mentioned a number of times here, the AI taking over from the human and the human being taken out of the process. And that's arguably the use case for AI writ large. But the risk is that that becomes the norm. And in the same way that I can't remember anyone's telephone number now because they're all stored in my phone, the risk is we reduce capability of us as individuals because we become over reliant on the technology to do stuff that we would historically have done ourselves. And that leads into understanding that AI is not infallible. And in fact, anyone that's used AI will have already seen that you don't get the perfect outcome, you get a version of. And that's fine if you're just wanting to write a draft email, but it's a bit more dangerous if you are designing a structure. So the key point that we came through with our research is a human should be involved at some point before you get to an outcome. Even if it's just overseeing the outcomes, they've got to have the knowledge to understand whether that outcome is correct and to almost as a gateway to whether it's allowed to proceed past that point. I think the general, more broad in society issue here is about, is this going to take our jobs? And I think that's something that businesses do need to consider, not just the actual, it will displace people, but the concern that your staff may have about what might this mean for my job. If people are being displaced, can they be redeployed? My view is, as with any other technology, this won't replace people's roles. It'll just mean they do different things that are hopefully more valuable. But do we know that? And do we know what those consequences are for the company of a reduced workforce? And even more broadly, what does that mean for the economy as a whole if there was to be large-scale unemployment off the back of this? So the classic mantra around data quality is rubbish in, rubbish out. So you heard it as trash in, trash out. The quality of your data is absolutely vital. And so you need to ensure that any information that you are using AI outcomes from is supported by good quality data going in the first place. If you use poor quality data, you won't get what you want, but also it'll undermine confidence in the use of AI going forward for your organization. And I think this is the final one is on ethics. So I think this is a real area of concern, is that each of us has grown up over the years to have, to a greater or lesser extent, a moral code, ethics, an approach to fairness. AI will only have that if it's programmed to have that. And we are definitely seeing sort of structural biases within the use of AI data. So from a company point of view, you need to be thinking about how do you avoid those discriminatory outcomes. intellectual property. So this is one of those big areas that we're seeing at the moment. The government's consulting on this. It is a hot topic. You do need to train your AI models, but at the moment, a lot of that data is perhaps the owners of that data have not provided their permission. So it's not yet clear where the government legislation will land in relation to this. So there's a risk that if you're using that, you may be undermining someone's information, intellectual property. So that does bring us on to regulation. So there's no AI legislation in the UK at the moment. However, all of these acts are things that you would need to be mindful of. Data protection from that privacy point of view, Equalities Act from the biases point of view, health and safety in terms of are you introducing new risks as the use of AI, and finally the Copyright Designs and Patents Act, so that gets into the IP issue. So we think that there will be legislation on this. The King's speech did allude to legislation, but we've not seen anything coming forward yet. But also, although we've left the EU, it's likely that we will be strongly influenced by European legislation and, to a lesser extent, global legislation. So if you're thinking about this, I think these are the points to consider. First is, do you know how AI is being used in your company, and are you documenting that? Have you done a risk assessment? Do you have a safe process for implementing AI? That point around third parties, what is your relationship with them? Are you just throwing information over the fence, or do you have a structured agreement with them? I think all businesses should now have AI policies, and it should be clear whose roles and responsibilities are under those policies. And finally, does your AI have a direct impact on individuals, and how are you making sure that that's fair? So the final piece of all of that is we had our report, but we also had some recommendations. So I'm very quickly going to run through those. So in managing risk, cross-industry collaboration and training. So on managing risk, we think we should promote existing standards. There are good quality existing standards for businesses on the adoption of AI, ISO standards. So let's use them rather than coming up with something new. I think we should look at developing specific reviews on the risks of use of AI in construction, building on the work that we've done. And I think we should talk about a confidential reporting system that we see in some regulated sectors, so that if things are happening that people have a concern about, they have an outlet to raise that. On industry collaboration, we should support, again, existing activities. So you've got stuff like the Bridge AI programme funded by Innovate UK. A lot of the big sort of research organisations have free or low-cost support to industry. So it's just a case of making sure that people are aware of that and can tap into it. We do think there should be an artificial intelligence community for construction, and we're starting to see the nascent signs of that happening. And we think there should be an AI implementation plan for the construction sector. The government does have AI implementation plans for other sectors, but construction was not one of them. And finally, on training, repeating what we said before, let's support what's already there. There's good quality training out there, so let's make sure that people have visibility of it. But we are currently in the process of developing some role-specific stuff, looking at the 5 job categories that we talked about. And finally, we think there should be security and ethics training for anyone that is using AI in the construction sector. And as part of that, that should be included within people's professional development. So talking to the professional institutions about that. So I think that was my last slide. It was. So I will hand back, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Alasdair. Yeah, I'm going to open the floor to questions. So either raise your hand or just unmute yourself and take this time to ask Alasdair some questions.
Hi. Simon here from Building Digital. Lovely presentation. I love the report. I take it the sector, accepted the report and was positive towards the results.
Yeah, we've had a lot of support since the report's been published, both on the day when we went through the findings earlier on this year, but because there are other people working in this space, one of the things that we're quite keen to do is marry up a lot of the piece. So it's trying, and that's why I was alluding to the community. I don't want us to do a load of this stuff in isolation. I do want there to be a unified approach to this, because as an industry, we do our best work when we work collectively.
Fantastic. Another question quickly. Now, you alluded to an AI community for construction. Now, what will that entail, and will you be driving that, or does it need other people to come and assist you?
So I would like this to be informal. I don't want it to be something that you have to pay a subscription to be part of, or you have to be a member of a particular organization to be part of. So to an extent, my view on this is it should be a virtual organization that, on the basis of people's sort of voluntary and discretionary effort, puts on events, provides case studies, things like that. Just almost a homework sharing club. So that if you, because what I want is, if I'm in a business, particularly a small business, and I don't even know where to start, I want someone who I can go to who's got knowledge that I can tap into and I can learn from. But equally, those larger organizations or those that have got capability in this space have the ability to deal with some of the roadblocks that are getting in the way of safe implementation of AI.
And so will you be setting that up, or?
So I'm just about to change roles. So it may, depending on what happens in my new role, maybe, but I'm having conversations with others in industry who have had a similar idea and are probably further ahead than I am. But I don't want to spoil their parade because it's theirs, not mine.
Thank you very much.
A question for you, Alasdair. So ethics and bias, that's kind of always pricks my ears up when you talk about that. Given the risks of AI, especially in areas like recruitment, which I actually is the first time I've actually heard it being used in recruitment, to be honest. So that's a learn for me. But contract analysis, obviously, and safety monitoring. What kind of safeguards or audit practices do you see as sort of essential, like right now, to put in practice?
So,
in a construction company,
as someone who's a big proponent of AI, I'm nervous about saying this, but it's one of those areas that I would almost start at a zero base off. We're just not going to do it because I think the risk of bias, not just for the legal ramifications, but the human being ramifications of if you are detrimentally affecting someone else's life because you haven't thought through the use of technology, I think that's something for us all to really consider quite a lot. But I would say that I think that's the kind of thing that collectively as industry, we can explore that. Now, I'm not that close to the recruitment consultancy world, but I would imagine, given that this is one of the big discussions in town for them at the moment, I would imagine that the relevant, whether it's REC or other bodies, either nationally or globally, will be looking at how to mitigate the risk of bias. Unfortunately, this is pretty prevalent wherever we use data, not even just AI, wherever we use digital technologies around data. But I think it's really vital. Look, as an industry, we've not got a great record on people with protected characteristics already. So adding another thing in that might further undermine that, I think is a risk that we need to be very mindful of.
Hi, Alasdair.
Oh, hi.
Yeah, that's Joe Brune. I'm the managing director of Building Digital, and I'd imagine, like a lot of emerging technologies, that the uptake is much more with the bigger tier one contractors. How are you finding? What are you seeing in the uptake are for the smaller contractors, smaller civil engineering companies, and what are you seeing them actually adopting of any AI technology, apart from obviously ChatGPT, which I think everyone's used by now? What construction-specific stuff are you finding the most uptake with?
So I think your general thesis is correct, that it's largely large that are thinking about this, but I would say my most aggressively interested in AI member is one of my smallest members, and he is using it for loads of things. Everything from ChatGPT to going out and talking to providers and saying, I don't want to be a small business forever, and I see AI as the ability for me to accelerate past some of my larger competitors. So I think the difficulty is he just happens to be really passionate about it. Unless you've got that fire in your belly, you're probably not going to be doing that. So one of the things, when we talked about providing training earlier, one of our early priorities is specifically looking at support for SMEs to understand probably at quite a basic level. So a lot of the stuff that I've talked to you about today, about what they need to be thinking about, how they can write an AI policy, what the tools are that are available to them that won't require them to spend £100,000 on a new server or whatever. So I think that's really important. I also think that to an extent, some of these decisions will be made for people because the technology is moving so quickly. Part of the problem with us publishing the report was we develop it, do it on write round to get some views on it, and by the time we've got people's views, the technology had moved on again. So I think for a lot of businesses, this will just find its way into the way they're doing their work. So for us, it's about making sure that happens in an appropriate way. And I think SMEs particularly will need help with that.
Interesting. I don't know if you do any work with Marie Coulter at Construction Coach.
Yeah.
But I know we've been doing a bit with her on an initiative that she's running around SMEs particularly, and obviously the wider digital transformation agenda, which AI is probably realistically 70% of, at least automation anyway. Just to echo Simon's point earlier about the AI community that you've got an interest in potentially setting up, we'd be keen to support that as a publishing partner. So just keen to continue that conversation with you post event really. So you're going to loop it in with that. We'd be keen to support that. Not necessarily take the lead on it, but help publicise it, help promote it, get people joining it, because obviously we see that as a massive benefit to the sector.
Yeah, so and I think that's a really good example because I don't want it to be a closed shop. So anyone that wants to be, I don't want to go, oh, well, we're going to go with this title or this title. It's like, no, anyone that wants to be involved, I want them to be involved. So yeah, very happy to continue the conversation after this.
Okay, I'll do a quick summary of today's event. So first we had Pavlina Nikolova, who was the AEC practice lead for Europe, Middle East and Africa at Ignite. Pavlina introduced Ignite and the Content Cloud platform and gave a couple of examples of good practice user cases. Pavlina went on to discuss some of the problems in using AI within a company system, and the main point is to start with a well-governed data set. Pavlina asked the question, how ready are you for AI? And explained if your data is not clean and consistent, then tools won't be accurate, just like Lego, but without the instructions. Now, AI principles need to follow the pattern, private, purposeful, and practical, and most importantly, should be easy to use and user-friendly, as otherwise, what is the point? Then we had Alasdair Reisner. He was the Chief Executive of the Civil Engineering Contractors Association. Alasdair discussed the current state of AI in construction, highlighting its growing impact across management, commercial, delivery, and support functions. He also outlined the key benefits such as improved decision-making processes, optimization, cost forecasting, safety monitoring, and recruitment. But he also did warn of the significant risk, including data quality issues, privacy breaches, overdependence, workplace displacement, bias, and intellectual property concerns. With no formal AI legislation yet in place, Alasdair stressed the importance of documenting AI use, conducting risk assessments, and understanding its impact on individuals. He concluded by recommending industry collaborations, adoption of existing standards, and targeted to manage AI risks and promote responsible use across the sector. And then finally, we had Thomas Hollingsworth, who talked about the future of construction. Thomas shared the company's journey towards a digital and AI transformation in construction. Starting from a tech-free site environment, Thomas spearheaded the integration of digital tools and real-time data, now embedded throughout platforms like Power BI and Ignite. BW drives innovation through collaboration with clients and consultants and tech companies via innovation hubs using agile rollouts and reverse mentoring to stay ahead. AI adoption from facial recognition on site to productivity tools like ChatGPT have improved efficiency, inclusivity, and accuracy across the business, even empowering neurodiversive team members. Emphasizing small, practical wins, trust and ethical considerations, especially in recruitment, Thomas reinforced that AI is not replacing people, but acting as an assistant, and that companies without AI in their plans risk becoming irrelevant. So that was our Building Digital micro conference titled The Future of AI Integration in Construction, and it was sponsored by Ignite. Thank you all for joining, and thank you all for contributing.